Upon your return home, Your Majesties, I know that you will convey the Australian people's well wishes to the Princess of Wales. From the beginning of her reign, path to modernity lay not in the emphasis of the people serving the monarch, rather on being a monarch who tirelessly serves the people. I acknowledge that her dedication to duty carries on in the Royal House of Windsor.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel where crowns and commonwealths do their intricate dance, a dance more fascinating than any novel and more surprising than most thrillers. Today, we are plunging into a story that bridges oceans and binds nations, a story that turned Australia's parliament into the setting for one of the biggest diplomatic twists of the decade. This wasn't routine legislation or another heated spar on domestic affairs. No, on this day, the halls of Canberra became something else entirely. The stage for an offer so sweeping, so generous, so unexpected, that it felt less like politics and more like a cinematic plot twist. And at the heart of this move, quietly yet unmistakably, stood Princess Catherine. Yes, the Princess of Wales, somebody whose resilience and humanity have elevated her well beyond ceremonial status. Her influence helped spark an unprecedented wave of cooperation between Australia and the United Kingdom, a leap bold enough to reshape alliances for generations. And what's more, King Charles himself was so moved by Catherine's unseen hand in the matter that he reached out with one of his rarest gifts, a truly personal note brimming with paternal gratitude. Before we untangle this diplomatic fairy tale, hit that like button if you're as enthralled by royal statecraft as I am, and subscribe so you never fall behind on the next chapter of this ever-evolving monarchy. Trust me, this story is one you'll want to stay glued to. It all began in mid-September 2025. The world was still reeling from a summer of summits, strained trade talks, and whispers of broken trust among allies. Since Brexit, the United Kingdom had been straining to rebuild bridges, to secure powerful partners that could define its new global role. The stakes were high. Enter Australia, a sun-blasted powerhouse at the bottom of the globe, rich in natural resources and perched strategically in the Indo-Pacific. Australia has always lived a delicate balancing act. Fiercely proud of its independence, yet historically tied to Britain through heritage and the crown, it had often flirted with republicanism. Tensions simmered in early 2025 over tariffs and Pacific security. Yet not even the sharpest insiders expected what unfolded in the Parliament House later that year. It started quietly. Whispered calls, a shared idea here, a letter there. Slowly, momentum snowballed. And at the center of those small gestures? Catherine, whose quiet but determined resilience had, time and again, softened divides and recalibrated discourse. This was not the hard-edged sway of a sovereign or the official language of envoys. It was her unshakable presence and empathy, the subtle statecraft of connection. This was not about handshakes alone. It was about a princess who, despite grappling with personal health battles, had transformed that vulnerability into profound influence. To appreciate the magnitude of the Australian Prime Minister's pledge, we must step back into the living tapestry of UK-Australia relations, a fabric woven through shared wars, fiery debates, family ties, and occasional tug-of-war for autonomy. In the early 2020s, as the world staggered from pandemic upheaval, Brexit left the UK urgently searching for reliable allies. Australia seemed perfect. Vast resources, a critical Pacific perch, and pre-existing ties of culture and commerce. That compatibility birthed the AUKUS Pact of 2021, aligning Britain, the United States, and Australia in a trilateral defense shield. Nuclear-powered submarines, advanced tech, cybersecurity initiatives, a powerful promise of collective resilience. It was groundbreaking. But by 2025, cracks began to show. In Canberra's corridors, you could hear murmurs about more independence. Republican voices resurfaced, echoing the referendum of 1999 when a republic nearly replaced the monarchy. King Charles himself toured Australia in late 2024, striking exactly the right tone. He spoke warmly, acknowledging the debates. It is up to you, he told audiences about Republican rumblings, while emphasizing climate action and shared love between nations. Crowds welcomed him, Yet beneath the smile, statistics showed a people divided, affection for heritage, but desire for autonomous narrative. Then came the Geelong Treaty of July 2025. Announced with fireworks in Victoria, it expanded AUKUS with a 50-year defense pact. Tens of billions in trade poured in, 7,000 new UK jobs bloomed, innovation flowed in AI and clean energy. Analysts dubbed it evolutionary progress. Substantial, yes, but not revolutionary. But on September 18, 2025, the ordinary turned extraordinary. Parliament convened for what seemed like a routine foreign affairs session. Citizens expected updates, figures, fine print about submarines, and tariff tweaks. Instead, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stepped forward and delivered the diplomatic equivalent of an earthquake. He unveiled a cooperation package so ambitious that lawmakers gasped. Beyond defense, beyond trade, it delved into the heart of shared humanity. Joint mental health programs, harnessing Australia's cutting-edge work with youth resilience, blended with Britain's initiatives in early childhood development. Environmental restoration pledges, twinning the Great Barrier Reef's protection with the preservation of UK coastal defences, a literal Oceans United project. Cultural exchange funds, fusing Indigenous Australian wisdom with British heritage preservation, ensuring knowledge was honoured alongside castles and manuscripts. The numbers stunned even seasoned diplomats. Over £15 billion in mutual investments over the next decade. Technology transfers and clean energy innovations projected to slash carbon emissions in key sectors by 20%. Australia applauded. London gasped. A senior UK diplomat whispered to The Times, "We braced for incremental gains. This is a lifeline. This redefines the Commonwealth for the 21st century." And then Albanese paused. His tone shifted from policy to personal. In front of rolling cameras and streaming feeds, he acknowledged a conversation that helped inspire his thinking, a voice carrying far beyond traditional statecraft, Princess Catherine. She reminded us, he said, why alliances endure, why investing in the next generation binds us across seas. The chamber burst into applause that drowned party lines. Royal fans across the globe instantly recognized the significance. What should have been a policy pivot became suddenly a triumph of human connection, Catherine's triumph. The path to that recognition traced back to Catherine's extraordinary personal year. Early 2024 brought the world to silence when news broke of her abdominal surgery, followed by the revelation of her preventive chemotherapy. What unfolded was raw, human, and global. A year of pain redefined into a narrative of resilience. By spring of 2025, she reemerged, not in fussy pomp, but with intentional grace. Trooping the color in June was less a royal duty than a quiet celebration of survival. Insiders whispered about her careful pacing, late nights of preparation, words weighed heavily with new wisdom about empathy and endurance. And out of private resilience bloomed public influence. William and Catherine were always positioned as the monarchy's diplomatic duo, unlikely soft power champions. But in 2025, she exceeded predictions. Collaborating with Melania Trump on humanitarian initiatives during a U.S. visit earlier that September widened attention. And in August roundtables, Catherine spoke with Australian experts on trauma-informed care for families. Her empathy bridged oceans. Her letters echoed King Charles's commitment to environmental stewardship, but personalized it, grounding her advocacy in family stories. Prime Minister Albanese, father himself, was struck by Catherine's candor. Her words cut through the noise, he confided afterward. And so by the time Australia's parliament roared with approval, the seeds planted by Catherine bore fruit sweeter than any treaty clause could ever deliver. Transport yourself now to Canberra's green-carpeted parliamentary chambers on that September afternoon in 2025. Lawmakers shuffled into rows, analysts prepared notepads, cameras stood poised for what was billed as just another foreign affairs update. Journalists expected the language of caution, phrases about strategic stability and incremental cooperation. Instead, Anthony Albanese adjusted his sleeves, leaned toward the microphone, and transformed routine into revelation. Australia was not just making tweaks to deals or extending contracts. It was rewriting the future of Commonwealth collaboration. Priority access to Australia's rare earth minerals, lithium, cobalt, nickel, essential for Britain's green tech revolution. These resources would supercharge the UK's quest for net zero, ensuring secure supply chains for electric cars, batteries, and wind projects. AI collaboration platforms to predict and mitigate disasters, Australian software melding with British research to forecast floods, wildfires, and coastal erosion. This wasn't defense alone. It was resilience against the storms of climate and crisis. A mental health innovation fund, seeded with £500 million from each country, targeting youth and early childhood programs. Even hardened legislators gasped. Catherine's Shaping Us campaign suddenly had a Commonwealth-wide expansion. It didn't stop there. Indigenous art exchanges, digitization of First Nations archives, joint curatorial work across Australian museums and the British Library. Britain's Rolls-Royce promised rapid transfer of upgraded submarine technology to Australian shipyards, securing thousands of skilled jobs. Australia would funnel profits from minerals into cross-border cultural preservation. The figures echoed louder than applause. £2 billion of shared funding in the first 5 years. 21,000 UK jobs protected. Tens of thousands of Australian jobs created. Whole new industries spun out of hydrogen storage research. But the financial headlines weren't what ignited passions. It was the humanity woven through the proposals, the very thing Catherine had urged in her quiet letters and conversations. Albanese paused mid-speech and declared, "This vision owes much to a conversation that reminded us why alliances endure." Princess Catherine's insights on nurturing the next generation, on resilience amid uncertainty, inspired us to think bigger, to act bolder. The chamber fell still. Applause erupted moments later, rolling thunder across partisan divides. Opposition leaders nodded in rare agreement. Back in London, number 10 aides phoned each other in stunned disbelief. "We came for submarines," one advisor said wryly. "We left with a soul." Clips flooded YouTube, TikTok, and X. Hashtags like hashtag Queen Catherine, hashtag Down Under Deal, and hashtag Catherine Effect trended within hours. On TikTok, edited sound bites of Albanese crediting Catherine were set against montages of her 2024 cancer journey and her triumphant return at Trooping the Colour. Viral captions read, "From hospital to history books." Royal forums lit up instantly, debating how Catherine's soft power had achieved more than entire legions of envoys. Republican voices in Australia, usually ready to hammer any royal involvement, found themselves muted by the sheer popularity of the moment. Even skeptical columnists admitted the strength. A commentator for The Guardian wrote, "If republicanism is to succeed here, it must outshine Catherine's empathy." Right now, that seems an impossible mountain to climb. But how exactly did Catherine shape this without breaching protocol? Royals never formally lobby governments. That is the iron rule. So how did we arrive at Canberra's mic drop address? It began quietly in July 2025 when Catherine hosted webinars tying the Royal Foundation's early childhood programs to global counterparts. Australians tuned in, including advocacy groups scarred by bushfires and floods. She spoke not of abstract theory, but of reflective pauses, her simple phrase for her health hiatus. She spoke of grief, of resilience, of how caregiving shaped leadership. Her openness resonated. Her candor cut through. Albanese later admitted to colleagues. Weeks later came her letter, not stiff with formality, but handwritten, describing how nature walks with her children had grounded her recovery. She tied this to environmental stewardship, urging Australia and the UK to amplify efforts for child well-being amid climate disruption. The Prime Minister, a father himself, connected. In turn, he responded personally, asking her thoughts on youth mental health amid geopolitical instability in the Pacific. She suggested weaving resilience modules into defense training, insights born from visits to war-affected regions like Ukraine. "Duty demands we safeguard hearts as much as harbors," she wrote. That single sentence rippled through Albanese's cabinet. By September, her ideas weren't just quotes in the margins. They were shaping policy briefs, briefs that would become the foundation of Parliament's proposals. Sources say Albanese's team studied Catherine's speeches intensely, even her 2024 Christmas message, where she called on families to find strength in small, grounding rituals. Lines from that speech allegedly inspired whole passages in Australia's Youth Resilience Initiative. She gave us permission, one senior aide admitted, to prioritize people before power plays. It was not lobbying. It was not negotiation. It was soft power distilled to its purest form, empathy turned into agenda, resilience converted into policy. And so, by September, when Albanese stood before his parliament with sleeves rolled up and eyes alight, Catherine's words were embedded in his vision. Her resilience became his rhetoric. Her quiet humanity bleached the ink of every policy draft. Critics often call sweeping multi-party deals flashy but hollow. Not here. Analysts across sectors recognized the benefits were real, immediate, and well-funded. Green Revolution boost, lithium and cobalt supplies earmarked for Britain's net zero pledges by 2035. Ministers hailed it as shaving a decade off timelines and reducing dependence on China by half. Jobs, jobs, jobs. UK defence industry projected £20 billion in exports. Manchester and Melbourne hubs opening for hydrogen storage pioneers, creating over 10,000 skilled roles each. Mental Health Alliance, not tokenistic but heavily resourced. Rolling out cross-training for 50,000 teachers, counselors, and GPs. Pilot programs in Wales and Western Australia showed high-risk teen dropout rates halved. Early interventions became scalable nationwide. Cultural infusion. Indigenous-led art exchanges to London's Tate. Digitization of Aboriginal histories stored in the British Library for online global access. Treasury analysts called it prevention at planetary scale. Markets responded instantly. The FTSE ticked upwards, Australian dollar steadied. It wasn't just diplomatic theater, it was tangible economic horsepower. Royal historians began slotting her influence into a lineage: Elizabeth II's stoicism, Charles's ecological advocacy, William's grounded relatability. But Catherine's addition was unique: soft power through vulnerability. During cancer treatment, her absence shook the monarchy. But her candor when she returned made her more human, more admired, and paradoxically, more influential than ever. Australia became the proof. Not because she waved on a balcony or delivered formal decrees, but because she whispered letters, joined video calls, and told real stories. Those whispers echoed all the way to Parliament. Royal watchers coined a nickname: the whisper that echoes. The aftershocks of Albanese's speech had barely settled when news rippled into Buckingham Palace. Advisors handed King Charles thick briefings, summaries of trade projections, lists of new cooperative ventures. Yet Charles's eyes landed not on the statistics, not even on the promises of green jobs or technological collaborations. They lingered on one line, embedded in the transcript from Canberra: a grateful acknowledgement of Princess Catherine, whose words had inspired a nation to reimagine its alliance. Court staff describe a monarch visibly moved. Charles, so often composed and deliberate, put down his teacup and let the words wash over him. Insiders say his eyes grew misty, his voice softened as he murmured, "She has done more in a letter than legions of envoys." For a man shaped by decades of duty, sometimes throttled by protocol, it was a startlingly sincere admission. By that evening, a personal messenger was dispatched to Adelaide Cottage, carrying one of the most heartfelt letters Charles had ever penned as sovereign. "My dear Catherine," the note began, in Charles's famously elegant hand. "In an age of clamor, your voice has sown seeds of unity across seas. Know that your grace not only strengthens our bonds, but fills this old heart with profound thanks." It was not the language of duty. It was not clipped or ceremonial. It was paternal, poetic, threaded with both gratitude and pride. Court historians later said it was among the most personal notes he had written since his mother's passing, a reflection not just of admiration for Catherine's diplomacy, but of kinship forged through shared resilience. When that missive reached Adelaide Cottage, William and Catherine were fresh from school runs, juggling homework and bedtime stories. To unwind from the day, Catherine reportedly sat with the letter, reading the king's words aloud to William. Their children, curious, asked about Grandpa's note. The youngest doodled small sketches of Australia's kangaroos to tuck beside their grandfather's handwriting. It was, in its own gentle way, the monarchy rendered human, a grandfather writing from the palace, grandchildren replying in colored pencil. William's own reaction was described as beaming pride. In private calls later that week, he toasted Catherine's impact, joking lightly, "Between you and the Prime Minister, I think I'll be relegated to tree planting." But beneath the humor, there was respect. He knew precisely the weight of what Catherine had done, shifting national sentiment not through grand speeches, but through soft power expressed in empathy and handwritten honesty. For William, long cautious of Republican currents in Australia, this moment brought reassurance. Polls out of Sydney showed 68% of Australians had a more favorable view of the monarchy following Albanese's announcement. Republicans felt muted, at least temporarily, drowned out by Catherine's wave of goodwill. What did this mean for the institution itself? Analysts argued it marked the beginning of a new template for royal diplomacy. No longer would the monarchy's influence rest solely on military parades, ceremonial tours, or glittering banquets. Instead, it would thrive on what Catherine had demonstrated: relevance through humanity, credibility through candor. For Charles, it validated decades spent advocating for climate action and community stewardship. His daughter-in-law was carrying the torch with a modern touch, her own narrative amplifying his lifelong passions. For William and Catherine, it became a blueprint for reign. They now had proof they could move governments not by decrees, but by inspiration. For the Commonwealth, it showed that the link binding these nations was not nostalgia, but forward-looking partnership, one framed around mental health, environmental survival, shared stories. Royal commentators coined new phrases. Catherine's whisper diplomacy, the empathy doctrine. Some said it was proof that the monarchy's female voices often carried the deepest resonance, from Elizabeth II's wartime broadcasts to Diana's humanitarian work, now to Catherine's handwritten note in an age of broadband politics. What defined her influence was its humility. When palace press officers were asked to comment, they released only a short statement deflecting credit. The princess is honored by the Prime Minister's recognition, but attributes success to collaborative spirit. That modesty became a magnet, amplifying admiration. Skeptics disarmed, critics softened. Australians who instinctively leaned Republican still noted Catherine's authenticity. One columnist for the Sydney Morning Herald wrote, "She is the monarchy's living paradox. She shows us royalty without distance, tradition without arrogance." Lest this all seem purely symbolic, the numbers told a story too. The cooperation measures sparked immediate gains. Markets rose, job announcements rolled out. Manchester and Melbourne engineers swapped blueprints for hydrogen hubs. Fisheries on both sides prepared for ecological restorations. Hospitals piloted mental health exchange programs by autumn. What Catherine had inspired materialized swiftly into practical benefits. For Britain's post-Brexit economy, the timing was crucial. For Australia, the pivot cemented it not only as a regional player, but a global leader in human-centered policy. Both nations walked away richer. Catherine's role was not sentimental garnish, it was catalytic spark. As autumn settled in Buckingham Palace, Charles reflected openly to confidants. Having fought his own health battles in recent years, he saw in Catherine's fortitude a mirror. Where he had shouldered decades of criticism to carry ecological causes, she had endured chemotherapy, invasions of privacy, and vulnerability, only to emerge wielding empathy as a form of statecraft. She carries steel wrapped in silk. An old courtier confided of Charles's admiration. He sees in her the monarchy's evolving soul. Already whispers prepare the next chapters. Catherine may headline a 2026 Sydney Summit on family futures, blending early childhood policy with technology and climate. William is expected to tie Earthshot innovators to Australia's booming green sector. Critics note Republican undercurrents will never vanish entirely, yet in polls after the September 2025 announcements, Nearly 7 in 10 Australians expressed favorable attitudes toward continued Commonwealth ties, citing Catherine's role by name. For Charles, it is vindication. For William and Catherine, it is confirmation. For the monarchy as a whole, it is rejuvenation. What began with whispered webinars, handwritten notes, and thoughtful conversations has become a diplomatic turning point. Not because Catherine chased headlines, but because she chose intimacy, honesty, and presence. When future histories record this period, they may well note that alliances were reforged not only through submarines and security pacts, but through the articulations of a princess who chose to speak softly, vulnerably, and personally. Catherine reminds us that diplomacy is not only about navigating strategy, it is about bridging humanity. Mental health, climate challenges, early childhood, themes once dismissed as soft issues emerged as the hardest foundations of a renewed Commonwealth. And so, as King Charles set down his pen that September night, as William lifted a quiet toast at dinner, as the children sketched kangaroos for their grandpa's note, the monarchy revealed its evolving strength. Not brittle tradition, but adaptability. Not aloof grandeur, but grounded empathy. Not retreat, but relevance. So here's the truth. Catherine did not deliver the speech. She did not sit in Parliament. She did not roll out spreadsheets of trade figures. She did not negotiate subclauses. What she did was subtler, yet greater. She reminded presidents, prime ministers, and ordinary citizens alike that alliances grow strongest when rooted not only in contracts, but in compassion. And in so doing, she helped a king feel paternal pride. She helped a commonwealth feel renewed purpose. She helped a future monarch carve a blueprint of authenticity for a reign not yet begun. This is not a fleeting twist of diplomacy. This is a watershed, a transformation. Catherine's quiet influence, blended with Charles's gratitude, has offered a glimpse of what the monarchy can be in the 21st century, not relic, but rebirth. So, friends, as the echoes of that September day in Canberra reverberate across oceans and histories, what do you think? Does Catherine's diplomatic deftness herald a brighter Commonwealth, or is it a delicate dance with destiny? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, join in the debate, and if this saga stirred you, hit like, share it with fellow crown chasers, and subscribe for the next unfolding chapter in this royal reinvention. Until next time, keep your eyes on the tide of history, because as William and Catherine keep proving, even whispers can move empires.